Welcome to The Good Word. My name is Vincent Goodwill, senior NBA reporter for Yahoo Sports and the host of this podcast. And in case you were not here for last week's episode with Ice, we are getting our own feed. We actually have it up right now. You can go get it wherever you get your podcast. Do not forget to rate, review, and of course, subscribe. You can also get all of the Yahoo Sports NBA podcasts under one feed, just like you could have in the old days. But if you just want to get one podcast in particular, like this one, go to The Good Word on Goodwill Podcast, wherever you get them, and subscribe. Hit that button. Now to the business of today's show. If you are watching us on YouTube, you can see the face of the man to my left or to my right. He is wearing Lions blue to antagonize me today. But it is James Edwards III, not to be confused with Buddha Edwards. It is James Edwards. He is a writer for The Athletic. He has moved from Detroit City to New York, or rather, somewhere around that New York area, because he's going to be covering the Knicks. So, James, you went from when you were, in Detroit, the Lions were a football team. Then they get good. You go to New York where they have two bad football teams. I'm sensing a theme here. What's going on, man?
I am a little worried, now that I left, that I just have bad juju with me, because I sat through a lot of Tigers games this past summer.
Oh yeah,
and was reading books and playing with my boogers. That team was so mid, and then I leave and they just go on this magical run, and literally, if they win Game 5, they play in New York, and I get to go see them, and they lose. You know what I mean?
You were going to pony up and get tickets to go to the Bronx?
I was gonna go, yeah, for sure. I was gonna go, and it would have been today, as we're recording this on Monday, and there's no game tonight, so it would have been a free runway to go. Yeah, man, I don't know. The Lions, my whole life were terrible. I always say in Detroit, as you know, Vinny, we take pride in the fact that the Lions are arguably the worst franchise ever. It's the lovable Lions. And they've grown into this dominant force over the last 2.5 years. And it's just shocking to see, because I didn't think I'd ever see it in my lifetime. Just granted that I went 32 years without even seeing a playoff win. 31 years without seeing a playoff win, which is insane in itself. But yeah, man, I'm out here in Detroit, or in New York, with my Lions stuff on. We just smacked up them Cowboys. So that's something me and New Yorkers have been able to find common ground on, smacking up the Cowboys.
I mean, look, I quit the Detroit Football Lions a long time ago. For those who know, that I quit on July 27th, 1999.
Yes, 99. I'm not mad at you either.
Yeah, and I'm not coming back. I'm happy for you guys. I'm happy for you guys who have stuck through this very toxic, very dysfunctional relationship. I'm really, really happy for you guys. I'm just not coming back. It would really be phony of me to come back and be a Lions fan and be all Honolulu blue and silvered out and the blue rush and all of that. Nah.
I feel you. I'll never forget. It was the Calvin Johnson game against the Bears where he clearly caught a touchdown, but because he put the ball down to try to stand up, and he didn't complete the
process. He didn't complete the process.
He didn't complete the process. I think I was a freshman in college, if I'm not mistaken, and I just remember watching. I'm like, that stuff used to ruin my day, and I was like, I can't let this team impact me my life like that anymore. So I took a 3 or 4 year break, and I told myself, if they ever win a playoff game, I'll be back. People can call that bandwagon. They can call whatever they want. I was the biggest Lions fan in the world up until that point, and it was ruining my day. And I said, all right, if they can do this one thing, which is, I'm not asking for much. I'm not asking for a Super Bowl. I'm not asking for a division title. I'm asking to win one playoff game. They do that, I'm coming back. They did that, and I'm back. So you can call that what you want, but I if you stayed the whole time, good for you. I like my mental health.
I mean, look, man, I've been a non-Lions fan longer than I've been a Lions fan. So
yeah, at this point, yes.
I don't count the first 4 years of my life because they don't really count. So I was really only a Lions fan for the better part of 10 years. And it was miserable.
I think you should say that the date that you mentioned, I know we know. I don't think others outside of Detroit know that date that you referenced and when you quit?
Oh, July 27, 1999. That was the day that Barry Sanders said, I've had enough. And that was also the day that I said, I've had enough.
There you go.
Like if the greatest running back of all time, don't at me, I don't want to hear it. If the greatest running back of all time says, I quit you on the eve of training camp before the season that he's supposed to go on the chase to become the NFL's all-time leading rusher, like a Super Bowl was never my, like in my like view. Like the record was the thing that I wanted. I wanted to be able to say we housed the greatest running back of all time. We still can say it, but
and receiver, I'll say it. I know people disagree, but we've also housed the greatest receiver of all time.
Yeah, I mean, Calvin is a top 5, but I don't look. Look, man.
I know there's stats, whatever.
No. There's eyes. There's eyes. There's eyes called Randy Moss. There's eyes called Randy Moss and Jerry Rice.
Randy Moss is my number 2. Jerry Rice, I'm the young guy that is like, I feel like if you ask any corner who would they rather line up against, if you put those 3 in order, I think Calvin's the last one they name.
Maybe so. Maybe
and
so.
That to me makes him the best receiver.
That don't look. Some dudes would much rather guard. Never mind. We're not going to do that. That's going to go into a completely different area, baby. People will not want to guard Stephen Curry, but Magic Johnson's clearly better. And we're moving on.
He's not, but go ahead.
Yes, we are. Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Shout out to Magic, Michigan State all day.
Yep. But as we begin the show, we're going to bounce around the NBA and let's get through some of this mid-October news because we got one more full week of preseason basketball before the regular season tips off next Tuesday. Now, the Hall of Fame was over the weekend and it was a class full of eclectic personnel, right? Mm-hmm. Vince Carter, Hall of Fame ball player, hands down, right? Basketball Reference had up 94.4%. That's pretty damn high, right? Deserved to be there. Chauncey Billups, shockingly, I won't say shockingly, I was shocked that Basketball Reference had him as a surefire Hall of Famer, but he is a surefire Hall of Famer, 84.4% probability. So, but for him to have come from the places that he came from in his career, to have the effect that he's had on winning, I think it was a pretty easy one. Michael Cooper, I don't know about that one, dog.
Yeah, that's crazy. With all due respect.
I don't know about that one. But here's the interesting thing. Because my buddy, J.A. Adande went in with the Kurt Gowdy Award. Yes. And for those who don't know, when you talk about archetypes of journalists who write, report, and then can also go on TV and do all the TV stuff, do all the game broadcast stuff, J.A. Adande is the archetype. J.A. Adande is the one in that space. There's a lot of people who can do it. It's like J.A. Adande and David Aldridge, who are like the godfathers of this. I don't say Michael Woodbine because he never did sideline, but D.A. and J.A., they are the archetypes for this.
Congratulations to J.A.
Yeah, man. He
tremendous guy. You obviously are much closer with him than I am, but he's been nothing but helpful to me and cordial to me in our interactions and even reaching out on his own throughout the years. So one of the guys I looked up to for sure. And
likewise
to even know him and be able to, if I needed something, I feel like I could call him, even though we don't have like a super strong relationship.
No, he is like the one. I love this speech over the weekend. Just all the great stuff. I love the Hall of Fame. It's a way to go back and reflect. It's a way to go back and look at the old highlight films and remember, oh man, this dude was really, really good, or whatever the case may be. But there was something a little different with this Hall of Fame. And James, I know you got takes. I'm sure you got takes.
Mm-hmm.
Because Jack Nicholson, Spike Lee, Billy Crystal were put into the Hall of Fame in a different sort of way because they are super fans. Of course, Billy Crystal is a super fan of the Clippers. I don't know how exactly that happens. Spike Lee is a super fan of the New York Knicks. That's very easy. And of course, Jack, who was courtside for all the Lakers games, talking all the trash. Like Spike sat across the way from the bench. Jack sat next to the visitors bench and gave everybody all the business. But is it a novelty? Do you think it's funny? Like, what do you sit on that?
All right, I haven't had enough time to flesh out my wording on this. So if I need to backtrack a few words, please allow me the grace to do so. I feel like the NBA at times, especially lately, leans too much into the culture. Like, there's the culture and then there's the culture, right? Like we don't need, and I know you agree with me on this, like why is there colorful courts?
Yeah.
Why is there 50 jerseys? Why are fans going into the Hall of Fame? Like it feels like they're trying to do everything they can at times to
they're doing too much.
They're doing too much, and I feel like it's with the not just like the entertainment culture, the culture of the, like thinking that people want like peripheral type things that people that are very niche, right? And I think sometimes it waters down the product.
Game
like,
is supposed to be the star.
Yes.
The stars are supposed to be the star. When you like the crazy thing for me, because like you talk about the jerseys, and that's one thing that really chaps my ass, right? It's the NBA is great at acknowledging its tradition. Like when you see the old films, and sometimes maybe they lean too much into it. That's why some people can't get out of the past or whatever the case may be. And I'm the most in the crates dude possible, but I also can recognize the way that the game has evolved and everything else. But for me, when you're too busy cashing in on nostalgia, you're not creating it. You're not creating the future nostalgia for your fans for decades down the line. For if I were to have kids or to have a son or daughter right now, what would be the thing for them to hold on and say to their kids, oh, remember when? They're too busy looking at my game and not their game.
For sure. I think that's a great way to put it. And I think to your point too, like if you think about like maybe the last 20 years of the NBA and you want to think 20 years ahead, like what are you going to recollect? What are you going to pass down to your kids? Honestly, outside of, and maybe it's just you call it the Warriors run, but I'll say Steph and LeBron's finals battles. What else? What else is there? There's not like the game is too focused on individuals. Fans are fans of players more than they are teams.
Yeah.
And I think that's in large part due to how the game has been marketed. And I do think that it is important that the European and overseas players have obviously come here and have had the success that they have. Like it's helped the game grow. But I think with that too, there's been an influx of fans, including, and I'm not saying it's like a European thing. I'm saying it's an American thing too. Like Instagram videos, like here are these guys highlight, like it's highlight culture because we have the internet, we have YouTube. Guys would rather look up. Back in the day, you would have to watch a full game. Like you'd get the VHS, right? Like you couldn't just find in 2002, you couldn't just find Allen Iverson highlights,
right?
Like you had to sit and watch the Sixers.
Yeah, the scarcity of it, the scarcity of it. Even if you knew that a highlight was coming, you were watching the whole game because you didn't know where it was at.
Exactly.
And with that, you wound up seeing a bunch of other things. It's almost kind of like, I'm not going to necessarily say this basketball player's name, but you understand who I could say when I say a rising boat lifts all tides. We can't have a discussion about Caitlin Clark because everybody gets their knickers in a bunch.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like that sort of things. I said knickers, not KNICKERS, not that other word with the two letters in between.
Yes.
Not there. Just for people not to get their trousers.
You pronunciated it well.
I thought I did, but that's what to make sure, because it's always somebody looking to be offended.
Yeah,
but
no, you're good.
You wind up looking for one thing and you wind up discovering something else. And now you don't get a chance to discover anything because of that. You also don't get a chance to just exist without the floor looking like an eyesore, or you're changing jerseys every single game. Like even the jerseys that you like, they disappear the next year. So there's no brand consistency. Right. And there's no chance for, basically what they're saying is we want you to buy a new jersey every year.
Which is like a soccer approach. Like as a big soccer fan, like soccer clubs have new kits every single year, two or three, right? But I would say the difference there is that's the world's biggest game. And there are multiple competitions. Like a team might wear a certain jersey in a Europa League match as opposed to a Premier League match, right? Like there's different competitions. It's a different type of thing. This is one thing, and teams have 4 or 5 jerseys. I think it should be home road, and then you can have one fun one.
Yeah.
If the Pistons want to bring back the teal and like that's their third one, like that's fine. If the Knicks want to bring back one of the Patrick Ewing era one, like that's it. That's what they get, right? Like I don't think there should be this many uniforms. The courts, like to me, it waters down the product. It almost makes it
it's a sideshow.
Yeah, I didn't want to say unserious because it's not that, but it almost feels like it's like the pretty girl. I probably shouldn't go down that analogy, but it's doing too much. Like, look at me. You don't need to do all that, baby. Like, you look good by yourself. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're here to see the game.
You sound like a man in a relationship who has at times become exacerbated.
Oh my God.
Exasperated.
I should have stopped myself.
It's all good, man. We are not going to get you in any type of trouble here, man. I only encourage happy homes. She's not behind you. I got your back.
She's in the door, but she heard me. It's okay.
Look, man, I'm gonna send her a text and I'm gonna say, hey, he didn't mean nothing by it, because she can't hear me. Only you can. So I'm gonna make sure you maintain a happy home. Now, the last note, James, for the third straight year, the Clippers hosted a preseason game in front of a sellout crowd in Seattle. For those who don't know, owner Steve Ballmer has huge connections to Seattle. He's actually a Detroit guy, but he lived in Seattle for a number of years. Of course, he wants to see a team go back there. I thought for a quick second that James Edwards' daddy lived in Seattle, and then I remember James Buddha Edwards actually lives in Seattle. This James Edwards wears a lot of Seattle Sonics gear, like that Lions hat that he got on. Like he wears a Seattle Supersonics hat. I've seen him wear to some games a few times. But just James, an untapped basketball market, and the NBA having to rectify a terrible mistake that it made in 2008 when they moved Seattle to Oklahoma City, the Sonics to Oklahoma City to become the Thunder.
Yeah, I went on vacation. I left Summer League this year and went to Seattle because I had never been, and short flight from Vegas. And you walk into stores, like the Supersonics still like live on. Like this is they really love their sports. They love their team. There are shops with like vintage Sonic stuff that was like phenomenal. Like it's an organization that I guess quote unquote still exists, right, in the form of the Thunder, but to not be in that market, but to be in some of the other markets that the league is in, to me feels like
some bad real estate in the NBA, dog.
Yeah, there's some bad real estate in the NBA. I'm not going to be disrespectful and name those cities, right? Because people have connections to their cities. Like I get upset when people talk about, oh, you're from Flint, the water, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like people get sensitive. I get sensitive too, so I'm not going to be disrespectful. But that is a market that it's obviously, in terms of the NFL, like one of the best. Was it the 12th man? Isn't that what they call the Seahawks fans? Like,
yeah.
It's one of the best. The NHL just recently went there. There's already roots there in the NBA. There's room for like a rivalry with Portland because of the proximity. Like to me, it's long overdue. I didn't really understand it in the first place. To me, they got to bring a team back because that is a sports town. It's a beautiful place. And like I said, I think that market would do better than I could. Like I said, I could name 3 or 4 markets that would probably benefit from moving from their location to Seattle.
Yeah, it's some bad real estate. And when you talk about players and franchises, you're asking players to move to place X. And you're like, wait a minute. You wouldn't move to place X. You want me to play basketball there for 9 years? And the people who I know who have either grown up in Seattle, like one of my best friends grew up in Seattle or spent the first formative years of his life. Everybody got a friend that claimed he lived somewhere and was a fan of the teams, even though he left when he was like 5. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like I got a buddy like that, man. He claims he's Seattle everything until the team is bad. And then he goes to the next place he lived and then he's there. You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. Yeah, it's one of those things. But yeah, long or the short, there should definitely be a team back in Seattle. I think it's going to be Seattle in Vegas, and I think Minnesota will probably move to the Eastern Conference, which will make all the sense in the world. 32-team league, 16 in each conference, and we move on. But we're going to pause for a moment to pay some bills, and we'll be right back with more of The Good Word. Welcome back to The Good Word, here with James Edwards III of The Athletic. James, of course, now covers the New York Knicks, a hell of a promotion. James, last night, in between flipping between Sunday Night Football, a bad Sunday Night Football game, some other preseason stuff, and the Hall of Fame, the Knicks had the most compelling thing of the night, going against the Minnesota Timberpups. They ain't the Timberpups anymore because they went to the Western Conference Finals last year. Mm-hmm. Dante DiVincenzo, who I felt like you would have got along swimmingly with had he stayed around.
Was looking forward to covering him, yeah.
You had an excellent feature on him this morning, going back to when he was the scout for the Villanova team before they played Oklahoma in a national title game, and he was portraying Buddy Hield, and he tore up his teammates so bad in practice that it wasn't going to be a good look, but he prepared them so well. Like, that is the genesis of the story. But pretty much Dante was jawing at the Knicks bench during a free throw. You could hear some of the boom mics, saying some stuff. You weren't sure if he was talking to Tibbs or he was talking to, someone else. And then after the game, when everybody's exchanging hugs and pleasantries and changing jerseys, he's going back and forth with Knicks assistant coach and daddy of Jalen Brunson, Rick Brunson. Now, what do you make of that? Because I think Rick Brunson is one of those dudes that just gets on your last nerve for a number of different reasons. And he likes tap dancing on your last nerve. So once you are no longer in the jersey, I think some stuff just comes out.
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to really converse with Rick. So I don't want to speak on that, but it definitely seems like he's a competitive guy who was competitive when he played, and that carries that with him, right? And I think that from what we were able to learn, Dante jokingly, it felt like Dante jokingly made a comment at Tibbs at the free throw line. I think certain people didn't think it was a joke and took it the wrong way, and then that escalated, and then at the end it escalated into what it was. But to me, what I was told is like it was not as serious as it appeared. Mm-hmm. And I do think, to your point, like, I know it sounded cliche when Tibbs said it after the game, just two competitive guys, but it kind of felt like that's what it was.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know, Dante and Jalen are very close. Mm-hmm. I think they are best friends, if I'm not mistaken. He was a groomsman in Jalen's wedding recently. This has nothing to do with their relationship. I think it's a mix of misunderstanding, two guys being competitive, and maybe even some behind the scenes stuff that we are not privy to, but I don't think it's as
contentious.
I don't think it's as contentious as it appeared. I don't. Yeah. I really don't. But it made for an entertaining night. Randall did not play in the game. Cat did at 16 points, 16 boards. It felt like it did not feel like a preseason basketball game in there. Kudos to the Knicks fans. There's a lot of seats filled. Really good game, some good defense. Anthony Edwards had 31 with 15 minutes left in the game. OG Anunoby had a really good hot start. The Knicks defense looks legit. Minnesota looks like a team, even though they're still ironing stuff out, that has been through some stuff, and good ball movement, good sound defense. I think it was just a fun atmosphere, a fun game, and it's certainly. They only play each other twice, right? So I wouldn't sit here and say this is going to be like a rivalry of sorts, right? But I could see that game when they match up twice a year being a little chippy, just given the peripheral storylines there between Dante, Cat, now Rick, and the Villanova boys and Julius Randle and that whole situation, right? Where he's helping, doing community work, and then 2 days later gets traded. Tough business, but I could see that game twice a year being okay, this is probably must.
It's gonna have some heat.
TV. Yeah,
it's gonna have some heat
there. Good way to say it.
Yeah. It's like a wrestling term. They got some heat there. For one, watching the game at Madison Square Garden is an experience. Even when I lived there and the Knicks were terrible, y'all, terrible. I would much rather go to a game at Madison Square Garden than at Barclays. Now, granted, the 2 years that I was there, it wasn't like those guys were playing as meaning Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. So maybe that would have changed it. But just the atmosphere of Madison Square Garden compared to anywhere else in the league. I'm not just bagging on Brooklyn, but I'm saying anywhere else in the league, it's a different sort of ball game. And when you look at where the Knicks could be this year, like they've loaded up. And you wrote an excellent piece on Jalen Brunson when you first got there and was basically saying the premise of it was everything the Knicks are doing is built around him. That's not a first for them, mind you. They've had Patrick Ewing there. They tried to build around him. They couldn't find like a second star. They had Carmelo Anthony, and Amari Stoudemire was already there, but he was going to go into rapid decline with his knees and his back.
They had like Rashid and older Jason. Like they had just had a lot of older players around.
Older players. Like the Jason Kidd, J.R. Smith, Amon Shumpert, like those guys. Like they were cobbling together some successful seasons, but it wasn't anything sustainable. For one, Jalen Brunson, that's why I'm turning over to you. Jalen Brunson is like next in the Eastern Conference. Only Giannis and Embiid are built around in the same way that Jalen Brunson is built around. And those two dudes are giants. This dude is barely 6 feet tall. A stocky 6 feet tall, but 6 feet tall. What do you make of the strategy of solely building around Jalen Brunson?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And to me, the proof is in the pudding, right? Like there is years of data and observations to suggest that Jalen Brunson gets better every year he plays basketball. Even though we try to put a ceiling on what he can be or how much you can win with a 6-foot guard or whatever that is, right? The dude averaged 28 points a game last year with barely any space, like with not the most ideal spacing situation. 28 on good efficiency. Now you're surrounding him with arguably the best shooting big man of all time. 2 wings who shoot 40% from 3 and can defend the other team's best guard. Josh Hart, who I have a piece coming out on Wednesday, who's an excellent cutter and spacer in terms of just like understanding movement off the ball and things like that, right? Like there's a world where Jalen could average 30 plus this year. And you surround him with defenders who defend at that level. Like Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby are the 2 best wings in the NBA who have not made an All-Star game. Like when you talk about premier role players,
yeah,
like that's every team, we've heard about it for years. Every team was trying to get OG and trying to get Mikal, right? And they have both. So building around Jalen to me is banking on what he has done and who he will be. And I remember Becky Hammond, Knicks fans were obviously up in arms kind of about her comments with you can't win with a guard that smaller. I don't think you can. And like, while I'm not sure that I agree, right? I don't think that was like a terrible take. Like we just haven't seen it outside of the greatest shooter the game has ever seen. And Steph's he's over 6 foot, right?
Yeah, Steph's 6'3".
Yeah, exactly. Right. So we haven't seen that happen in quite some time.
There's 2 guards. Yeah. The number is 2. For those who don't know, the number is 2. There's 2 guards in the history of the game where a championship team was built around him. Stephen Curry and the second greatest point guard of all time, Isaiah Lloyd Thomas III. Period. Though it's just it. Now you're telling me, I'm not saying you.
No, I know.
The Knicks are saying whether he's cutting that mold or not doesn't matter. They're saying we're building a team that covers up his deficiencies while also accentuating everything. Because someone made the point to me and says, if you think of Jalen Brunson as a 6-foot post player, he makes sense.
Yeah.
As opposed to a point guard that's just up at the top of the key, breaking you down. But if you think of him as an inverted post player who's also left-handed, which is a great advantage for him and a great disadvantage for defenses, then all of this makes sense. Like last year, after Julius Randle got hurt on January 27th against the Knicks, he averaged 31, 7 assists on 48% from the field, 37 from 3, 86 from the line. That's pretty damn good efficiency when you're playing for Tom Thibodeau and you don't have space.
Yeah.
Now, granted, we saw what happened on the back end and that 7-game series against Indiana where the Knicks' bodies just broke down.
They had nobody left, right?
And I'm very curious to see how that works, right? I'm very curious to see, because from a depth standpoint, James, you go outside their top 6, and I got questions.
So there's let me say this. Let me lead with love because I'm still getting acclimated to the Knicks fans, and I know how much they love their team. I think this Knicks team has a chance to go to the NBA Finals. I think they are very good. I think they're going to be a tremendous offense. I think the defense, at the very least, is going to be solid. I'm curious to see the Cat Brunson dynamic defensively, right? Like, I think teams are just going to put Brunson and Cat in pick and rolls and see what that does, right?
Yep.
So we'll see how that plays out. But I do think this is a team that very much could get to the NBA Finals. Now, what I will say, and what if that doesn't happen, there's 2.5 things that I think are the reason why. One, the depth, right? Miles McBride is probably, I think that's the number 6 guy you're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
And bucket getter, scorer, more of a scoring guard than a point guard. Obviously, guys like Landry Shamet have shown stuff in their careers and are solid NBA players. And there's a world where Landry's like the best value contract. Like, there's a world where he's the best value contract in the league, right? Because of what he can do. Tyler Kolek, I don't think he's going to be in the rotation early on, but he's looked really good in the preseason. But you kind of I think this is what I was trying to get across when the trade happened, and I apologize for jumping all over the place.
No, you got it.
To me, do I think Cat is a better player than Julius? I do. Do I think the gap is big enough that losing Dante makes sense for a team that's depth was kind of very pivotal to their success last year? That's where you kind of lose me, right? And I also think that for what it's worth, the grit, and I'm saying that as a Lions fan, that's our motto. The grit and kind of makeup of the roster last year that, one, helped them get to where they were, but two, it really endeared them to the fans. Dante and Julius are like dogs that fit that mold, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not saying that any of the newest additions aren't dogs. Like, I'm not saying that, right? I'm saying that I know that they lost 2 dogs.
Right.
And guys that are gamers and that just have that kind of, New York and Detroit are similar, right? Like that they're tough SOBs, Dante, and like we saw last night, right? Like, he ain't afraid of shit. But so that I'm curious about, like, when you get to game 6 in Boston or game 7 in Philly, like, do you miss that dog? Do you have that dog still? And I think they do have dogs on their team, but you lost 2 more. And then the other thing is, like, yeah, kind of I talked about defensively, like, is Cat gonna hold up when it matters, right? The pick and roll, teams are gonna spam pick and roll with Jalen and Cat. What do you do with Mitchell Robinson when he's healthy? Very clearly, the Timberwolves thought they needed to put a center next to Cat. They went and got Rudy Gobert, but I think the Knicks, if the goal is to build around Brunson, like, you play Cat at center. So I'm ready kind of for the season to start to see how many of these things like manifest. Because I think there are a very good team that does still have like some miniature questions that determines the ceiling.
It's multiple agendas and you're wondering, or conflicting agendas, I will say. And I don't mean agendas as in like a negative thing. I'm just saying agendas as in objectives and what a team wants to look like versus the team's reality. Mm-hmm. And you're building around Jalen Brunson, so you need space. But to cover up Jalen Brunson's deficiencies, you probably need a rim protector. Instead of a rim protector, you have, like you said, the two of the best defensive wings, long. One is long, one is strong. Both are really good that can sort of make up for that space. Are they covering up the space for Jalen Brunson on the outside, or are they covering up the space for Karl Towns on the inside? Mm-hmm. That is the question for me. Also, my concern is that this team is landlocked now. Like, they use some real, very sneaky and smart machinations to get Karl Towns. Yeah. Like, when you are over the first apron, you can't take out more than you bring in. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Or you can't bring in more than you send out.
Yeah.
And that was the case for actually both teams. So they wound up basically just facilitating some stuff, finding the third team and getting it. You won't be able to do that now to improve your team. You have your draft picks, I believe.
Yeah.
But now you've got Mitchell Robinson as the one sort of tradable piece that you have, but you have all these restrictions based off the CBA.
Mm-hmm.
And with him playing 31 games, 72, 59, and 31, and then being out through the first of the year this year, I wonder what type of appetite there's going to be for other teams to really want him if they need to improve their team through the year.
Yes, I agree with you. I think the writing suggests that if this Knicks start doesn't go as smoothly as I think fair to say we anticipate it going, I think that you'll hear Robinson rumors heat up, right? Even more so than they have been, because like you said, he is the most obvious trade chip if you're trying to improve the team. Now the question is, what do you use trading Mitchell Robinson? Like, do you just get another center, maybe who's a little bit more reliable in terms of games available? Do you address something else, right? Like, how do you use Mitchell Robinson if you end up moving on from, like, what do you bring back? Because I think what I was saying earlier and what we've yet to find out is, can this defense be a great defense with Cat at center? And if not, well, I don't know if there's anybody better other than Rudy Gobert that you would want next to Captain Mitchell Robinson, right? So it's like, you got to walk a fine line, and I think they are going to take these next few months to really figure out what it's going to look like. And it's kind of hard to put into words because we just haven't watched meaningful basketball, right? Like, but there's certainly things like you're suggesting that, like, there's miniature storylines to really pay attention to that could, in the end, like, build up to something bigger than it feels right now, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah, and there's this, like, for one, I saw the Western Conference Finals last year. I was there. And so much of the attention went to Rudy Gobert and his deficiencies and how you tried to play him off the floor, and Isaiah, say Likely. But I think that's a Baltimore Ravens receiver.
That's
Lively, Derek Lively.
Lively, yeah.
Derek Lively the second. And how those guys sort of played Rudy off the floor, played Rudy off of effectiveness. I remember Karl Towns not having a great series at all when the lights got brightest. And there is no brighter lights, theoretically, than in New York City. There's national expectations for the Lakers. There's national expectations for the Celtics and locally, too.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know if there's a greater local pressure than there is playing in New York City for a Knicks team that has real designs on getting to the NBA Finals for the first time since 1999, the lockout season of 99 when they were 8th seed, and they beat the 8th seed, the top seeded Miami Heat in round 1. They beat Atlanta in round 2 because, of course, they're the Hawks. And then they beat the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals before they got slaughtered by before we knew it, dynastic San Antonio Spurs of Tim Duncan and David Robinson, right?
Yeah.
So they've been starving since then. And when you bring in Karl Towns and you bring in Mikal Bridges, the expectations are going to rise exponentially. And you're looking over at Philadelphia and saying, hey, man, you better be ready for Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we've seen those two have a history. So I'm very curious if Karl Towns, not from a talent standpoint, but just from the expectations of it and playing for a coach who they didn't have the greatest relationship the first time around. Like, you and John Krasinski wrote a great piece maybe a week ago about how those two mended their relationship. But you can mend your relationship in the preseason, and then it gets really tested by the fire of the playoffs, and you figure out how well do we really know and like each other. Yeah,
no, that's fair. And I think that dynamic itself, and it's not just, I don't think it's just privy to Cat and Tibbs. Like, I think that's in general, right? Like, this is a new team, which is kind of I think that was my biggest thing with the trade, right? Like,
too much change.
Yeah. For a team that I think we all agreed would have been in the Eastern Conference Finals if they just didn't get hurt. Like, I'm not sold on the Pacers as others are. Like, I think the Pacers are probably a team that's going to
you are a Tyrese Halliburton truther for those.
I like Tyrese. He's nice. Like, he's a good player. I just don't I don't know if he's I don't know if that team's as good as it showed last year. I think Miami's going to end up passing them. I could see Indiana as a 7th, 8th.
I mean, they also beat a Bucks team that didn't have Dame and didn't have Giannis in round 1.
Exactly. So my point is, I understand the value of the trade on its surface. You're trading 2 all-stars with flaws for one another. Like, that's solid value given the situation, right? But I also just, I don't know if that trade needed to be made. Maybe it needed to be made, and that was kind of what they've talked about. They needed a center, not getting Isaiah Hartenstein, but adding that team with Mikal Bridges and maybe and I'll just use a name, what if you just added like an Isaiah Stewart instead? Like, is that team, if healthy in the playoffs, like that team is, as you know what I mean? Like, maybe that's all they needed was just health. Like, I think there's risk in shaking something up that worked before, and only reason it didn't really work is for forces out of their control. Now you're coming in, new Mikal Bridges is coming in, Karl Anthony Towns is coming in, Josh Hart's role changes, OG Anunoby's role might change even, and they didn't even really play with him, right? Like, he got out. So, and then your bench is kind of mashed together. Deuce McBride and Precious are really like the only consistents there. So, I think for Tibbs, like, he's going to learn a lot about guys. I think there's going to be trial and error, and I think some guys, I don't really care for the word sacrifice, but there's going to be some. It's just going to be I think it's going to be more of a patchwork than people think.
It's not. I don't think they're going to start and off and hit the ground running. I'd be surprised if they did. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Just like I was wrong for the Celtics in the finals, and they put me on that Summer Jam screen when they put together the mashup of all the people who got the Celtics going into the NBA Finals wrong, and they had me at the tagline. Right. Fine.
That's because they know you hate Boston too, the city of Boston.
I don't hate Boston. They got some great restaurants, some great chowder. But
you like clam chowder?
Yeah, yeah.
I know you're a picky eater. That surprises me.
Yeah, I like clam chowder.
Okay, that's surprising.
Yeah. And I went out to dinner with people who know Boston.
That's fair.
So you're going to like some of the best spots. Now, there are some other elements of Boston that we don't necessarily have to talk about here that are not as friendly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But by and large, Boston's okay.
Like Boston. Yeah, I like Boston.
Of course you would like Boston. They think you're one of them.
Shut up.
They do. They think you're one of them. Now, to the point, I think for one, Karl Towns deserves credit. Like I just talked about, I guess a not so flattering element, but I will close on this. In the Western Conference semifinals against Denver, he played really well defensively against Nikola Jokic.
He really did, yep.
Especially when Rudy Gobert was off the floor and you couldn't hide him somewhere else. Now, don't get me wrong. There's still the plays where Karl Towns is going to do the bongos on you. And be like, man, Karl, why'd you do that? It's 10 minutes left in the third quarter. You just picked up your 4th foul. Yeah. But those moments seem to come fewer and further between when they used to. The big concern with me with the Knicks is health. Remember, Karl Towns missed time. Was it a knee?
Yeah, and his injuries I wouldn't call him injury prone, but he's had more injuries as of late.
Yeah, and then also OG Anunoby, who had the hamstring, like not too long after getting to New York, it seemed like he never really truly felt comfortable, and maybe that was free agency looming. I don't want to give up my leverage. I know I'm getting a deal, but I want to make sure that I keep myself upright. So you want to make sure that aside from Mikal Bridges, who's going to play every game, he'll play 85 games if you ask him to. Josh Hart doesn't sit down at all for some games because Tibbs is going to play him that way. I do wonder from a health standpoint about the Knicks because they are so thin up top and they have to learn each other in a very short period of time. Those are my biggest concerns for that group. But talent-wise, James, they will find themselves. Like, this is a round robin, so to speak. Like, there's 4 really good teams in the East. I think you would agree, right?
Yeah.
Milwaukee, who I think teams are kind of sleeping on because they've only won 1 playoff series since winning the championship. Milwaukee, Philly, New York, and the champion Boston. Like, you can't avoid anybody, theoretically. Like, you're going to find yourself in a game 6 against somebody that you don't want to be in a game 6 with. And you better be healthy, and you better be playing smart.
Yep. No, I agree. I think that's an excellent point. Like, I think you give the nod to the champs, right? Like, they're the top dog, but then you look at those other 3 teams, and It's kind of you look at which flavor you like more or what appeals to you more as, I think, a fan of the game, and you can maybe talk yourself into one of them being behind the Celtics more than the other. But at the end of the day, I think Milwaukee still has the most dominant player of those three teams in Giannis.
Yep.
Him and Dame they didn't add barely anything this summer, right? But Dame and Giannis can still go. Sneakily, Philly has done a really good job of adding. While New York lost depth, Philly added depth. They add Paul George, they add Caleb Martin, they add Eric Gordon, they add Andre Drummond, who had a really good year in Chicago. They add Reggie Jackson, who's shown he can still go. They've added some pieces there, right? And then New York, you can make the case. I mean, Boston fans would disagree, and Knicks fans, like, you 1A, 1B for the best starting lineup in basketball. It's probably the Knicks and the Celtics, right? So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I don't subscribe or prescribe to the Tibbs works his guys into the ground, and that's why they get injured. Like, I just think his teams play hard in basketball, and things happen in basketball. But Mikal Bridges will be kind of like the ultimate test case, right? A guy who hasn't missed a game since high school. Like, if he, like, people, I can already see like the outside narrative being, oh, see, look, Mikal doesn't miss a game until he's with Tibbs, which I think is just insane personally. But that narrative will come if Mikal misses any game.
Well, I do look. The confirmation bias is going to sit in with Tibbs no matter what happens. If Bridges winds up missing games at some point, it's not going to be because of the correlation of all the games that he's played in his career up until this point, never taking time off. It's going to be because Tibbs ran him into the ground, right? That's what that's what the narrative will be. Yeah, that's what the narrative is.
And I agree. I don't agree with that, but that will be what the narrative
is. And the thing is, all the individual cases may mean nothing. Right. I always say the micro creates the macro. All the individual cases is like, man, it's like there's a cop and there's always a dead body around. Man, how you discover this dead body? Like, you know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. Like maybe that's a bad analogy, but you get like the cop movies, right? Yeah, then you find out that the cop is like the dirty cop. Yes. Not saying that Tibbs is the dirty cop, but you get what I'm saying from the standpoint of always his teams managed to break down at the worst possible times. It all stems from Derrick Rose, by and large. This conversation all stems from Derrick Rose, and we will never get that taste out of their minds, even though I think Tibbs has grown as a coach. This is a better offensive team than it is a defensive team. They're just playing like a better defensive team than offensive team right now. If they're going to win, they're going to win on offense. So I'm very curious how that's going to play itself out. But
I think Tibbs is one of the me and you are very, and I know we have to wrap up. Me and you are firm on Spo and Ty Lue being the best coaches in basketball. Yes. I personally think Tibbs is in that conversation. I think people forget that he's had top 5 offenses in Chicago, in Minnesota, and in New York. Like, the dude lives and breathes basketball, and I never hear a bad word from players who have played for him. I mean, listen, how many of his star players have wanted to play for him again? Like, that says something. Jimmy Butler, right? Derrick Rose. Now, like, Katz talked about it, right? Like, this is a thing.
Could be Stockholm syndrome.
Stop.
Just playing. But when we come back, we're going to talk about James's team that he used to cover and if they have any prospects for this season and beyond, those Detroit Pistons. We'll be right back with more of The Good Word. And for today's last word, we're going to talk about the Detroit Pistons, the team James used to cover. He's never covered a playoff win for the franchise, to be perfectly honest. Neither did I during my time as a beat writer. Maybe we're both the curse of the Detroit Pistons. They have not won a playoff game since May 26, 2008. Game 4 of the Eastern Conference Finals against the Boston Celtics. Don't ask me how I know these things because I can barely remember what I ate for dinner last night. Now,
you are Rain Man when it comes to dates in sports. I'm bad with dates in sports, but you're Rain Man for sure.
Stupid. It is the most useless Jeopardy information. Like I've gone through this stuff before. Yeah, it is. Like I can name all MVPs from the year that I was born. Like
you did do that. I quizzed you, and I have quizzed you before. I maybe asked you the NBA champions or something.
Oh yeah, that's easy. That's easy.
You did rattle it off.
Yeah, that stuff is so. I can do that in my sleep. Like literally, I could probably close my eyes and start falling asleep. And you said MVP in 1995, like, oh, Dave Robinson. You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. Just ridiculously goofy. But now that you're no longer with the Detroit Pistons or covering the Detroit Pistons, maybe they can get under this bad shadow, right? Monty Williams gone, Troy Weaver gone, Trajan Langdon, JB Bickerstaff in. I would venture to say that is an upgrade from the product that we saw last year, from starting the season with 5 centers and the Killian Hayes stuff and the 26-game losing streak and Monty Williams, like how invested is he? I feel like a lot of the clutter is gone to some degree, but I still feel like there's other questions that remain.
Yeah, for sure. I think that what needed to happen this summer, just given how kind of insane is not the right word, but I mean, that's tough, right? Like, from a reporter, like, again, I don't care about wins and losses. I care about the best stories. But at a point, it's like, what? Like, how many times do I have to write that they're bad? Like, what is, like, you know what I mean? Like, we get the point.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a lot. But last year, everybody, there needed to be some type of cleanse from last year. Like, no, that's not healthy for anybody, right? And they do that. I think that this team they're my sneaky pick to make the play-in. And let me explain.
Please.
They are the one team at the bottom of the conference. First of all, the bottom of the East is terrible. And 10 teams make the postseason. It's probably 8 good teams. It depends on where you're at with Miami. It's probably 8 good teams. So that means there's a 7-way fight for the last 2. Detroit, Cade Cunningham has never had spacing, and you were at every home game as well pretty much last year, and Cade had a really good season without spacing, right? Now you add Tobias Harris, you add Malik Beasley. I know Tim Hardaway has struggled in the preseason, but they added Simone Fontecchio at the trade deadline. Tech 19 can shoot the blood out of the ball. Like, they have spacing around Cade for the first time in his career. I've kept an eye on them this preseason. It looks like Jaden Ivey is shooting the blood out of the ball in preseason as well, right?
Yes, he is.
There are pieces there to play a style conducive to the centerpiece, which is Cade Cunningham. Now, to my point, let's look at the bottom of the East. If you told me Detroit is better than Atlanta, are you shocked?
No.
Or you told me Detroit is better than Chicago, are you shocked?
Slightly.
Than Chicago? You think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Chicago might be better than people think.
Okay, that's fair.
As long as Zach LaVine is you know what I mean? Like, that's contingent. Yeah. But go ahead. I get your point.
I just think that team, I think they're living in the excitement of the season starting, but once you get to December 12th and they're 4-12, like, I could see that team tapping out. You know what I mean? Just guys that might not care anymore. If you tell me Detroit is better than Charlotte, are you shocked?
No.
Toronto?
No.
Like, and Washington, Detroit's better than Washington, I think. So that's all the teams. And it's like, to me, you look at Detroit, and because they've lost so much over the last few years, they're the one team that can't afford to lose a lot again.
Nope.
And other teams can. Washington can. Charlotte can. Atlanta can.
But there's no expectations in those places. There is no franchise tradition in those places. So therefore, there won't be a lot of disappointment. Like in Detroit, like, it's been so bad. Like, I just mentioned how bad it is, but that is a legacy franchise. And when people hear that, they don't think of that in that way. But that is a legacy franchise, especially when you consider the modern NBA. And when I say modern NBA, I mean post-playoff expansion to 4 rounds and 16 teams back in 1984, the year I was born. So that's a 40-year sample size. The Boston Celtics are the number 1 team in terms of making the conference finals in the East. You know who the number 2 team is over the last 40 years in the East of getting to the conference finals?
Detroit?
The Detroit Pistons.
Yeah.
Yep. That's how often they've been in the hunt. Now, granted, it happened in these very big and very well-defined clusters of periods where it wasn't just, a year here, a year there, and that's how you wound up adding up to, 11, I think it is.
Yes.
But you remember those periods, and they had, great series against great foils, and they were, great franchises at the time. So you don't think of them now in that way, but there are expectations in this city of being able to get it right, because you got to give people a reason to come out in the middle of January when there's other entertainment options and the weather is cold and you can sit at your crib and watch it on TV.
and you know this too, and I find this so it's very much a difference between Detroit and New York. Like, I feel like Knicks fans, and again, excuse me if I'm wrong, I feel like Knicks fans, it's like when you call, like, there's a bully at school and they're picking on like your little brother. Like, I can call my little brother fat, you can't call my little brother fat. That's Knicks fans. Detroit fans love to hate their teams. You'll tweet about the Pistons losing by 20. Like, who cares? We're watching the Lions. Who cares? We're watching the Red Wings. Who cares? We're watching the Tigers. Or the Red Wings are struggling. Who cares? We're watching the Pit, right? Like, they love to hate their teams. And when the Lions are doing well, and it looks like the Tigers might be on the rise, and the Red Wings showed some stuff last year, like, I wasn't ever going to leave Detroit for a town that wasn't as invested in sports as Detroit. And New York is one of the very few towns that is. And that is a tough place to play, Detroit, because the fans have seen what winning looks like. They know what winning looks like. They are, like, similar to Knicks fans, are tired of getting beat on nationally. And they're just tired of losing. And there's expectations there. And I think that they have a roster capable of taking the progress that they should have taken last year. It's going to be interesting to see. I think they need to stay healthy, but Isaiah Stewart developing into a solid 3-point shooter, and what he brings defensively, looks like Jalen Duren has shown a couple flashes defensively in the stuff I've been able to see. Like, there's pieces there, man. It's just, now it's just got to do it. Everybody's heard about the pieces for the last 7 years.
I mean, you got to figure some stuff out. And producer John notes of all the teams that you named, Brooklyn.
Brooklyn,
yes. Yeah, because they're in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, I don't
capture the flag.
I don't know if Brooklyn will be fertile ground enough for Cooper Flag to go there.
I think so. New Brooklyn?
I think you're missing what I'm saying, James. You will figure it out after the show, because I'm going to tell you after the show, but I'm not going to tell you on wax. Now,
okay.
The last thing, Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey, you just mentioned them. Evaluation year for them, or are you gauging the market? And secondarily, you can pick on both of these or one of these. Cade Cunningham, is he an all-star player or an all-star talent?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm for sure gauging the interests of Ivey and Duren, just simply because I think that's good business.
Yes.
Like, neither one to this point has shown you enough to give them lengthy contracts beyond this season when they're
extension eligible.
But it looks like, from what I've been able to see, that Jaden might be having you second guess if this stuff, and I'm not expecting him to shoot 53% from three and 70% from the field during the regular season, but if you have the condensed version of that, then you ask yourself some questions, right? JD, all the talent in the world, very smart player, just defensively just has to figure it out. And I've seen that he's done some good stuff. I think he did last night against the Warriors, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't watch the whole game. I saw clips and stuff, but you definitely just have to do good business and figure that out, right? And they're pretty deep at center. Like, Paul Reed's their third center, which he's overqualified to be the third center on the Detroit Pistons, right? But he's not as good as Duren and Stewart. So yeah, I think you have to just technically, like, just do your due diligence and gauge the interest. But I wouldn't be afraid to sign one of them if what they've shown is real. And then I think Cade Cunningham is an all-star player. His numbers were identical to Paolo Banchero's last year in a much worse situation. You look at their numbers, they were identical. And Paolo made the all-star team. Cade now has spacing. It's kind of like Brunson. Like, I know a lot of people compare Cade to Luka. I think I see more Jalen in his game.
I see if it's possible, and I think we said this before, his sort of spirit animal should be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Right.
Because he's bigger than Jalen Brunson.
Yes.
He's taller than Jalen Brunson, but he's not as big as Jalen Brunson. Jalen is big and stocky, so that allows him to play, that allows him to play in a
small and
space.
Compact. Like, it's Shai, man wins.
Shai is long and lanky and not exceptionally quick, but he winds up getting to the spots that he needs to get to. Cade isn't necessarily going to blow by you athletically, because if he did, he'd be Grant Hill and we'd be having a completely different discussion here. So I just think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, which is not a put down. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a top 3 MVP candidate this year for a team that we think is going to be the best team in the NBA.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Cade is a very, 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 very talented player, and I think that what he showed last year, and the fact that he was able to improve off of the leg injury and in that situation last year kind of told me all I needed to know about what he can be. And the fact that he just now in year 4, God, I'm getting old. In year 4, has a roster around him that is conducive to his strengths. Like I think Cade makes an all-star team this year.
I mean, look, the numbers from last year, 22 or almost 23, 22.7, 7.5 assists, 4 rebounds on 45% from the field, 36 from 3, 87 from the line. I would expect, if nothing else, the efficiency to get better. And, I would expect that. I wouldn't expect the scoring necessarily to go up. It doesn't have to, because of some of the guys, like you have Tobias Harris, who's going to take up some scoring. You're going to have Jaden Ivey, assuming he's the starter, who's going to take up some of that usage.
Malik's going to get his shots up.
Yeah, if nothing else, the vets going to get their shots up. If nothing else, the vets, they ain't showing up to just be wallflowers. They showing up because it's an opportunity there. So I'm curious for a number of different things. I like JB Bickerstaff. I like the demeanor of Trajan Langdon and the clarity and how he, discusses things. The franchise has always had a little one voice too many. I'm very curious to see how that plays itself out throughout the regular season when you go through a slump and you start hearing trade rumors and stuff like that. I'm going to be very curious to see how that initially plays out. But James Edwards, man, before we leave, you are a new New Yorker.
Mm-hmm.
How are you adjusting to New York City?
I love it. Part of the reason I decided to do the job was I always saw myself living here and I wanted to say I did it. I felt like I was young enough to this is a good time to do it. I like that. I feel like I'm always busy. Even just getting from point A to point B, I don't back home. You just get in your car so you can sit on the couch an extra 45 minutes and leave 50. You know what I mean? You got to leave earlier. You feel like your day isn't wasted, even if it is spent traveling. So I like that. There's something to do every single day. I like to walk. I can just get lost in the city. The only 2 things I don't like:
the rats,
dogs shit on the sidewalks because people don't have yards. You know me. We're in the same. We like to rock our kicks, and it takes 45 minutes to go 3 miles. Sometimes that's just you had a long day. That just kind of drives you nuts. But that's what you sign up for. Yeah,
it's one of those things where if you live in a normal city, you can get 5 things done in a day. You can go to the mall, you can go to the grocery store, you can go to Target, you can stop in a couple other places. In New York, if you want to get 5 things done, you're going to have to stretch that out over the course of 2 days. Because you're going to look up and you're like, wow, where did the day go? You're going to look up, you're like, man, wait, I got to get on the subway for this?
Yeah.
And like you said, it takes 30 minutes to go a mile. And it's not, sometimes you don't always have the option to walk because it's not always flat where you need to go. I mean, they make it simple enough for you to be able to get around wherever you need to go with the subway systems in New York and New Jersey. The problem is it's just way too many people and way too much nonsense. That's all. But
it's been great, though. Food's been great. People have been great. I like where I live. I've enjoyed it. It feels like home. It's starting to feel like home.
There you go. That's beautiful. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is James Edwards III. He is, of course, a senior writer for The Athletic, and now he is the Knicks beat writer after so many years doing great work in Detroit. Don't forget to follow him. He is one of the best writers covering the league right now, digs into the crevices of teams and can also zoom out and give you some great features. Read him, subscribe to him, all that type of stuff. Thanks to producer John and the entire team who works so hard behind the scenes. And I'll be back on Wednesday with Ice. Until then, everybody be safe.